Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Elish, and I'm the Marketing Communications Specialist at Vibrant Communities Calgary. I'd like to welcome you to our annual general meeting. We'd like to acknowledge and honor all who live in Calgary or Mohkinstsis in Blackfoot, who make our homes in the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Stoney Nakoda, and Tsuut'ina nations. We acknowledge the Métis people and the Métis Nation, Region 3, as well as the settlers who call this land home in Southern Alberta. We are all treaty people. I'd like to welcome Elder Clement Leather from the Siksika Nation to do a blessing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see some familiar faces. Well, I'm very honored to be asked to say a prayer for this meeting. So it's going to be in Blackfoot. Ayo napi, ayo kapitaki, ayo naknato etapia. Ayo kino katsini, katsamatwa no kretskoik. Katestiuna pakkinana, kinakanokakuta peipus pennan. Anika kiisukitsistana kiiteitistä tuppina. Anak matapioakaa kinukutaspummuannaan annika kiatsemuiska. Kauatsuutspummuut siis pinnaan annika kanomianne setapioaka. Ahteissukaa piika näktsikus. Anika kiitsetapoavaka. Ahse puutumuukinnaan annik seippumaa pii. Seippumiksimista. Augenikkeet sen kaapai. Aika kohtetski pukai, et papokamista muukinnaan. Aukenne niitä paukamannista panok kriitsi kuikaan. Auke aamuksaakin, kan omianne sitä piakaa kiinokatto peippuja. Hänä kummakinaakin pitääkin. Onna sinä kiva kesset semaan. Puukkaava kannakaa se tapiakaan. Hänä kauhkuumista miksi hänä kiitä opii täyssukinnakin. Aukena käsuvat omaa pio päätäpiissä. Ainakin taisi sinäkin kenaapi, kun töitskätä muu kennaan noksiitsi kuika. Aivoksi ottaa pitsistä tuupinnaan, essohtsekaa keneksetä poavakaa pinnaan. Aukenne niin tukamanu, kaamo taanesta vatsimaan, ahsaita piisin naa piuissa. Hän.
Thank you, Elder Clement, and thank you very much for joining us today for our annual general meeting and starting off us in a good way. This year, we did something different from our past AGM. We concluded the business portion of the meeting earlier today, and this portion of the meeting will reflect and celebrate 2020 through storytelling and art. Our team at BCC will be sharing the MC duties, and each of them will introduce a portion of the program. A few housekeeping items to get started. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. We invite you to participate by sharing comments in the chat box. We'd also like to acknowledge our board members, partners, advisory committee members, champions, and friends. To kick off this year's AGM, I'd like to turn things over to Patty Dolan, our board chair. Patty needs no introduction because she's been a part of the BCC family for a long time. She's a leader, community organizer, an all-around amazing person. Join me in welcoming Patty Dolan.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you, Elder Clement Leather, for opening us up in a good way. Our thoughts are with you and your relations during this time of profound mourning. We continue to stand with you as we move through our journey in the truth and reconciliation and to realizing goal 3 of the strategy, that all Indigenous people are equal participants in Calgary's future. As mentioned, my name is Patty Dolan, Chair of the Board of Vibrant Communities Calgary. As we evaluate our collective progress towards achieving enough for all in 2020, we are left with mix of feeling sad that we lost a year on the work that we had planned, which was quickly overshadowed by a feeling of deep pride and respect for the collective efforts to ensure people in our city who live in poverty were supported and represented. 2020 also presented us with some unique opportunities to do things differently that accelerated critical strategic elements of the work that we do. I was co-chair of the Enough for All Strategic Refresh, along with Karen Whiteman. We could not have known at the time that the strategy that we were creating would hold up in something as disruptive as a global pandemic. And yet it has proven to be a steady North Star over the course of 2020 for many reasons, but really two stick out for me. The first of those reasons is that systems that hold poverty in place are extraordinarily deep and are at risk of being further entrenched during the shock to our community. Enough for All accommodates the complexity of those systems and provides numerous ways for our E4A champions to be involved in innovative solutions. The rapid innovation showed by our champions to change systems and work towards improving them, even in this chaotic last year, inspired me greatly. It is far above and beyond what we could have imagined the role of a champion to be. And I thank each and every one of you that are here today for the work that you did and are continuing to do. The second reason I believe Enough for All stood up in this time is perhaps the most important to me. Our strategy directs us to seek and include and elevate the voices of lived experience of poverty and of Calgary's Indigenous community in everything that we do. The voice that directs the work of the strategy is dynamic, is diverse in perspective, and constant in its reliability to guide us. And that is why Enough for All worked in a pandemic, because the solutions that were being designed in 2020 were built for the people who are most impacted by them. Thank you to Poverty Talks and to the Indigenous Advisory Committee for doing the work of showing us the way. As I complete my year here as board chair of Vibrant Communities Calgary, I'm grateful for the board of directors I've had the privilege to work alongside. I look forward to continuing on the board in an advisory capacity and to see us realizing the magnitude of what we accomplished as a community once we have the benefit of hindsight. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I'm looking forward to it. I also want to recognize the City of Calgary, the United Way in Calgary and area. Without your financial support and commitment to the collective impact of our work would not be possible. We'd also like to thank Momentum, our MOA partner and charitable sponsor, who also provides such amazing support to vulnerable people in our city. And finally, I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation to the VCC staff, who have been tireless in their efforts this year. I would really like to thank the staff because they've been able to balance all the work that's been thrown at them and their personal lives, and they've done a tremendous job. So just a moment to say thank you. Every year, VCC completes an evaluation of the progress it has made towards the goals of the Enough for All strategy. This year, along with the impact study, we felt it was important to learn about the experiences of Calgarians living in low income and to understand how pandemic affected them. The stories were difficult to hear, but hearing those stories are important to our work. I would like to invite VCC's policy and research specialist, Lee Stevens, to discuss this study. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. The report, Understanding the Impacts of COVID-19, was in partnership with the University of Calgary, and researchers collected survey responses from 187 people living on low incomes and did follow-up group interviews with 23 people to understand how COVID-19 impacted their day-to-day lives. As part of the study, we received considerable feedback. The verbatim comments were incredibly eye-opening. Today, we're going to be sharing some of those comments with you throughout the AGM. A common theme we saw in the responses was having to choose which expenses to cover, leaving some to skip meals, medications, having to go without glasses, or living with dental pain. This included a troubling theme related to worsening health and wellness. Here's one of the respondents. I now take my medicines half the time, every other day, because I can't afford to pay for them every month. I have had to access food banks now that I didn't require before, except at Christmas. Now I'm getting them every second month when I can and doing less with food in the alternate months. We hope these stories will inspire you as they have inspired us to keep doing this important work. The full study will be released in mid-June, but throughout our AGM, we will provide you with some of the free-form comments. These voices of lived experience will shape our work. I would now like to introduce VCC's Executive Director, Megan Reid.
Thanks, Lee, for sharing that first story, one of many, and thank you to Elder Clement for opening us in a good way today, as you always do. We are mourning alongside you and your relations today, and we also mourn alongside the Afzal and Salman families and the Muslim community following the terrorist attacks in Ontario earlier this week. So as Patty referenced, we had a pretty intense year in 2020 at VCC, as we all did. We encourage you to read more about the tangible and quantifiable benchmarks of our impacts, both in the 2020 report to community, which is available online. You can read it. I believe it'll be linked there in the chat. And also in our Enough for All evaluation that's led by Dr. Katrina Mullaney from the University of Calgary, which will be released later this month. It does speak to the incredible work of our champions, partners, and allies whose efforts last year were nothing short of awe-inspiring and a masterclass in rapid social innovation. We talk about social innovation a lot in our community and in our country. That was deep social innovation. I believe our champion network is stronger than ever because we have these new skills and muscles we can use. And I want to thank the board, the Indigenous Advisory Committee, and Poverty Talks for providing incredible guidance in a space of no playbook, which was absolutely 2020. And I also want to express my gratitude to the VCC staff, and you'll hear from all of them during this AGM, but I get to show up on media or in presentations, and that's great. But I am a mouthpiece for the work of this incredible team that I am humbled to work with. And it's not every day that you get to show up at work and work along people who are excellent at what they do. And so thank you so much for that. So both Patty and I have talked about the quantifiable benchmarks, the numbers. You've heard a lot of numbers from us this year. And those types of benchmarks are incredibly important because they inform us, they give us milestones, they help us change policy, and they justify the need for strategic systems thinking, particularly following disastrous events. But our AGM is set up this way today to remind everybody that's here that systems need changing because systems impact people. Systems impact people. Having an AGM that is storytelling and art is because it captures the stories and experiences of the people that Enough for All serves, who are our ultimate truth tellers about the effectiveness of this strategy. Collectively, anyone who's at this AGM, this tells us, is what we are doing together working. What has been the actual experience of people living in poverty? What do we need to harness of these stories in order to move forward? Has this experience changed over time? How will artists and elders, which in VCC's opinion are our best mirrors for how we're really doing at any point in time, tell the story of now? And how will that look different moving forward? Our AGM graphic this year, if you registered kind of formally, shows people standing together and it shows their backs. And you can interpret these people as looking backward, or you can interpret this group of people as looking forward. We chose this graphic intentionally, realizing that Enough for All calls us in this present moment to hold space for both reflection and looking forward. What do we need to learn? What do we need to unlearn? And how do we carry this into our future? So for VCC, moving forward does not happen without people who live in poverty and a recognition that any trauma experienced over the 2020 that we're looking at today comes with us as we move forward into the future. Moving forward doesn't happen until we face the truth of our history and our present and engage in active work beyond thoughts and prayers and reconciliation urgently. And moving forward means that we actively recognize that the systems that hold poverty in place are the same systems that hold racism in place. Enough for All has long called out racism as a root cause of poverty, and that's why it continues to serve as an excellent roadmap for our collective path forward. So as you listen today, the stories of our past have always been there. And I think what we've realized, as a country, as a community, is that we have fallen by not incorporating these stories into our collective truth and into our collective action. We can do things differently, and we can do that right now. So hear a story or carry a truth that you learned here today and have it inform your action. How will you, how will your organization, and how will your networks hold space for that story and hold responsibility for what you are hearing. What story are we creating collectively for when we meet together, hopefully in person a year from now? And what will the stories that the elders and the artists, what will they tell us in terms of how they saw this year? And will we be proud of what we hear? So we invite you and urge you to join us in creating a new story this year. With that said, I would love to introduce Georgi Scalplock from the Siksika Nation, who will be performing a traditional dance. So I'd like to, can you hear me? I'd like to recognize Georgi Scalplock, hand to heart, and to Alex for sending that to us. You can see in the chat portion that Buddy just has informed us that this dance is the fancy dance, which originated in the Southern Tribes of America, and really powerful and amazing to see. And I love the inclusion of youth in our AGM in this way today. And that is an area where we are definitely putting a lot of focus. in an AGM. We love to announce transitions and comings and goings. And so at this point, I would love to recognize Al Crane Kimji and Karen Whiteman, who are departing directors for the board. Al Kareem has served for a very long time as our chair of the HR and Governance Committee, and has been quite tireless and very supportive, of course, over a pandemic. And Karen has brought a lot of expertise from all of her years in the nonprofit sector to help inform our board over the years. And so we'd like to express our great gratitude to Al Kareem and Karen for their time with us. And do we have the next slide? I'd also like to recognize some transitions that are happening in our board. So as you heard, Patty is not going to be board chair, but we're not letting her go that easily. And so she will be staying on with us as an advisor for the next year. I'd also like to welcome Adam Legg, who has been on our board for a year, into the position of vice chair, and to congratulate and welcome Corey Gitter as our chair. Corey, you'll be hearing from next, is the Deputy Executive Director at the Law Society of Alberta, and she practiced law as a civil litigator and then worked as legal counsel to the Court of Appeal for several years. Corey's been in the Enough for All and VCC family for a long time. She was previously a member of the stewardship group of the Calgary Poverty Reduction Initiative and has served as a director on the boards of CCVO and YWCA Calgary. And I know that we all very much look forward to her leadership in this coming year. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you, Megan, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd also like to thank Elder Clement for opening us up in a good way today. It's my great pleasure and honor to take on this role, and I would be remiss if I didn't express my profound gratitude to Patty. Her shoes will be massive to fill, and she's provided us as a board and the organization with tremendous leadership, and I'm so grateful that she'll be with us for at least another year as an advisor. I know we will turn to her frequently and need her advice very, very much. I'm also excited that Adam Legg is going to be taking on the role of vice chair. I also know that that we'll be leaning on him quite a bit as well as we find our way this year without Patty at the helm. So I'm excited about the opportunity. I couldn't be prouder to be involved with this organization and this work. So thank you for allowing me to take on this role. As my first, I guess, official job as chair of the VCC board, it's my pleasure to officially welcome two of our new board members. I'm excited to announce Shairoz Damji and Evelyn Nayaro to the VCC, or joining the VCC Board of Directors. This was just recently confirmed at both our board meeting and our AGM. So Evelyn is the founder of Eli Bianca, a Canadian-Kenyan all-natural, environmentally sustainable skincare line that recognizes beauty in all its forms. She's passionately committed to bettering the lives of women around the world by empowering them through business practices, including profit sharing, fair trade programs, and education. She holds a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from the King's University College and a Master of Science in Environment and Management from Royal Roads University. She's a member of the Alberta Society for Professional Biologists, the Association of Professional Engineers of Alberta, and Eli Bianca is an active member of Calgary's Be Local network. So welcome, Evelyn. We're just thrilled to have you join us. Shairoz Damji, we're also thrilled to have you join our board. Shairoz owns and operates Navigating the Gray Space, where she acts as senior legal counsel. She's a mediator and accomplished in regulatory, stakeholder relations, land compliance, administrative law, and Indigenous relations. Prior to this, she held senior roles at TC Energy, TransCanada Pipelines Limited, Talisman Energy, and the Energy Resources Conservation Board. She's deeply committed to poverty reduction and has served as board chair at the Calgary Immigrant Women's Association. As chair of the settlement portfolio of the Ismaili Council, she championed holistic programming for Afghan refugees. She's also served as staff counsel at the Family Law Office of Legal Aid Alberta, and currently as a legal clinic volunteer with Calgary Legal Guidance. Shairoz holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Calgary, a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Manitoba and received her law degree at the University of Calgary. So these are eminently qualified and committed people that we are thrilled to welcome to our board. So welcome to you both. This year, VCC also added a new role to its small but mighty team. We know that catalyzing knowledge across our levers of change is the only way we will create meaningful integrated systems change. And to help make this happen, we hired the talented Jacqueline Silbernagel as our knowledge exchange specialist to help make this happen. It's my pleasure to hand the meeting over to Jacqueline and introduce her. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Corey. We very much look forward to having you as our board chair. In my new role, it's my pleasure to work with our Enough for All champions and help support the network through making connections and building relationships and capacity as we all work together to create a community where there is enough for all. I invite you to read with me the second story from our study. The pandemic has pointed out the difference between living in poverty before and during the pandemic. New people have discovered what poverty is. There were tons of services, but once again, the bottom rung were excluded. A homeless guy walked up to a drive-through to get a free mask, and he was told no. The province decided the best place to get masks was a drive-through. Then the restaurant got to decide who gets them. The guy who couldn't afford the mask didn't get one. What kind of a system is that? We allowed that to happen. We didn't say no, that's stupid. That policy makes no sense. It's clear that the pandemic really brought to light the expanding gaps in health as well as social inequities. Bridging these gaps will drive some of my work this year. I would now like to welcome VCC's Poet Laureate, Erin Dingle. When we were looking to tell the story of 2020, we knew Erin was the right person to do it. Erin tells it like it is, and she cares deeply about social justice and issues like mental and emotional health. Join me in welcoming Erin Dingle.
Hello. Can you hear me well, everyone? Yes, I didn't get to do a sound check. My apologies. This was really more challenging to write than any of my prior years. Writing in a bit of a vacuum, I was saying to Sue yesterday, is very challenging. But I think I sat with it and I came out with what I felt coming out of 2020 and what I feel VCC does consistently. I wish it was brighter, but there's some hope in there. So I think it reflects what has been said overall. When the world locks its Cerberus jaws, some people Medusa freeze, some Prometheus light it up, and some narcissists shout it down. Some Sisyphus stay, and some narcissists shout it down, while some Icarus fly away. And most of us do the imperfect best we can with what we have, because we're people, not mythologies. And some of us struggle to stay Apollo bright when Poseidon drowns each night or days spin Atlas stormy. We can only hold up so much for so long, any of us. Even Atlas put the world down once. And many people fought breathless battles against Ares' enemies. You know, these oppressors that we can't shock or awe or mask into absence long before the rogue coronavirus waved. And these nemesis have generations, genetics, and variants, just like COVID-19, just like Gorgons or Titans or Furies. We carry many heavy names for monstrous human realities. Chronic sicknesses, mental illnesses, racism, sexism, classism, ableism, poverty. Poverty is pandemic. It is endemic. And we know the treatments and protocols of protection. Equitable access to resources, a roof, a bed, meals, medical care, social support, childcare, education, enough for all. Respect, a space to be heard and held, a purpose to fulfill, a sense of value and inclusion, active engagement in solution finding, personal investment in stories and recoveries, and money. Always, always cash money. Enough for all. See, poverty is the most common comorbidity. It increases the deadliness of every other disease. And if talking about finance openly feels crass or blunt or ugly, that's privilege. Privilege is the right to choose not to talk about something. And people living in poverty are forced to talk about money. People who aren't are not forced to listen. But we know pandemics will get worse when they are ignored or denied. We learned that in 2020. 50 or 70 or 80% coverage against poverty will not suffice. We need enough for all. And now some people will always take a shot for anyone in their community. A lot of them are sitting here. Some people, they will take shots at anyone who chooses public sacrifice over private satisfaction. And most of us fall somewhere in between. We choose to become the virus or the vaccine. After surviving 2020, we know behind our scrabbling social media screens and our 6-foot scattered eye contact streets that every crack in our Parthenon and Pantheon becomes extra visible when we can't just leave. We also know other people's leaking homes go even more easily ignored when we don't have to see. Just ask all the Northeast Calgary residents who are still Oracle waiting for insurance repairs years after hail destroyed their homes. I mean, sheltering at home requires the shelter of a roof, doesn't it? And for those with the most to lose, trust lies understandably low in those who control our gains, in well-cut suits and tongue ties, in Olympic courtrooms and office spaces and closed cabinets, and in vague promises flung down from a mountaintop. I mean, even Orpheus doubted the love of his life and had to look back. And there is no love lost between social welfare and social systems, because our systems crush humanity under supply and demand and economic distancing. Trust is always earned. It isn't a fund. And those with money tend to think people without it are automatically the ones who always need to do more work. But the work of trust rebuilding belongs to those with economic advantage. The work of personal communication and clarity, honesty, accountability, advocacy, even in absentia, gifting leadership to lived experience and granting responsive change on a respectful timeline. If we do not address this pandemic assertively, individually, systemically, now, future treatments will not protect collective humanity. There will not be enough for anybody. And this year we were reminded that what is mine and what is yours can never stay perfectly apart. We witnessed how a Trojan horse or 4 horsemen riding will burn down all that we build and share if we do not guard each other's needs as well as we shelter our own. Because poverty is a human virus. It can come for and from anyone. There's no quarantine, but we have access to proven treatments. And if we all share our own doses, I still believe we can create enough for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Erin, for that wonderful poem. You know, Erin's storytelling and her poetry is similar to kind of the work that I do here at VCC as the Indigenous Engagement Facilitator. It allows me to tell stories and hear stories, especially ones from like our elder Clement, who share stories with us, and our elders, like from our Indigenous Advisory Committee, like Evelyn and Wanda, who share stories with us. And you know, that's the way we preserve our history. That's how we learn who we are. And that's kind of our blueprint for the future. So storytelling and the oral cultures is really prominent, and it's something that we as Indigenous people are able to resonate with. So thank you. You know, the pandemic has demonstrated an urgency of advancing work for Indigenous to reduce Indigenous poverty. And some of the ways VCC is doing that is through Goal 3 of the Enough for All and the formation of the Indigenous Advisory Committee. The committee consists of elders Evelyn Goodstriker and Wanda First Rider, and Indigenous professionals like Tim Fox, April Bellegarde, Doreen Williams, Christy Morgan, and our newest member, Sam Shaw, who helps lead VCC with our Indigenous work along with myself. So at this time, I'd like to introduce one of our committee members, Tim Fox, to share some words.
So thanks, Buddy, for that introduction. And thank you to Clement for his opening words and his prayer. Always seems to ground me in times of sorrow, and it's definitely what we are collectively feeling in these days. So, Oki, good afternoon. My name is Tim Fox, and I'm a proud member of the Six of Gates at the Bee, the Blackfoot Confederacy. As mentioned, I'm here to bring remarks from the Indigenous Advisory Committee on behalf of Evelyn Goodstriker, who couldn't be with us this afternoon, but she sends her regrets. The Enough for All strategy talks about the importance of building understanding and mutual respect for Indigenous communities. Having empathy and compassion is key, along with learning from our past, reflecting on our present, and making choices that influence and support future generations. This past year was extremely challenging for all. We've heard people refer to lifestyle changes brought on by the impact of the pandemic as the new normal, and how we have had to transition to working and schooling from home, socially and physically distancing ourselves, experiencing shortages of food supplies and other household necessities, seeing businesses and organizations around us have to close their doors, and realizing that our way of life has granted us unimaginable privileges. The stark reality for many Indigenous communities across North America is that this is not the new normal, and an experience that is not unprecedented for our nations, as we have been facing massive inequities, limited access, and denial of basic human rights since the arrival of settler nations. Poverty makes people vulnerable, and when the pandemic hit, it was clear that our communities were going to see disproportionate effects, and we saw these effects amplified in 2020. All these inequities were exacerbated by the pandemic of social justice that also emerged, spurred on by the public murder of George Floyd and the subsequent loss of life due to systemic racism by many other Black, Indigenous, and other racialized people the world over. Most recently, the discovery of 215 children's remains at the Kamloops residential school has left us in a deep national sadness. A devastating reminder on the importance and need for systems change to the very institutions we are all a part of. I want to acknowledge the strength and perseverance of my colleagues on the Indigenous Advisory Committee, for the bravery we must show up with every day. Hand to heart for the wisdom, knowledge, and commitment of residential school survivors, Evelyn Goodstriker and Wanda First Rider. And to the rest of our committee members, Christy Morgan, April Bellegarde, Joanne Pino, Doreen Williams, Shannon Keach, Michelle Forney, and Buddy Dixon. It's been an incredibly heavy few days for us all, with equally hard days ahead. As parents, our biggest priority is keeping our children safe from harm and protecting them from pain. We're moving through the grief of this news, as I'm also learning when this conversation is such a huge part of your being and your work, it's almost as if you're learning about the loss of a family member, but in this case, 215 family members who are also children. Throughout it all, Each one of these elders and committee members continue to show up for this work of change. The committee was pleased to see progress made on the development of an Indigenous gathering place in Calgary. A community update will be provided in the afternoon of June 23rd, and we can send details on that update to you all after this AGM. VCC has been at the table to help advance this effort to create an urban Indigenous space for sharing, connecting, healing, and celebrating Indigenous culture. Eskitsagum, or Seven Brothers Circle, supported community members to ensure basic needs were being met during COVID-19, but also that they have the supports required to get through this challenging time. We were glad to see VCC's involvement and support within a number of circles. In recent days, we have been excited to help several Enough for All champions on their Indigenous learning journeys. We've also had some opportunities to collaborate with several Enough for All champions at 2 Indigenous learning events. These events will help champions reflect on their own truth and reconciliation journey, an essential first step in removing barriers to engagement. Despite these great initiatives and progress made, the Indigenous Advisory Committee also saw some incredible challenges. It is important to note that continuities from the past shape the present context of health and healthcare. When considering how we can take a systems change approach to our work, even through a pandemic, we must continue to look at the root causes of inequities and consider these within historical, economic, and socio-political contexts. This context helps to frame the contemporary disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people and depicts how racism is intersecting and overlapping with ongoing acts of colonization. Taking time to unpack the historical context is about raising important truths to guide our path forward. These truths acknowledge how Indigenous communities across North America are at the front lines of inequities and injustices that continue today. Gathering for the Indigenous Advisory Committee was difficult, and we had to adapt for our meetings. I'm pleased to say that we've resumed meeting regularly. This will help us to advance the collaboration and work that is so urgently needed for Indigenous communities in and around Calgary. Reflecting on deficit statistics such as, why are Indigenous people living in urban settings statistically more likely to experience poverty and deep poverty, which means less than 50% of the poverty line? Why are Indigenous people more likely to have more serious outcomes from COVID-19? And why are their life expectancies more than 10 years younger than the national average? Why are Indigenous people overrepresented in the sorrow systems of justice, child welfare, and homeless populations and in shelters? We often know the answers, but we need to ask new questions, and there's still much work to do. On behalf of the Indigenous Advisory Committee, we thank you for the patience and grace afforded to us in this work, and we look forward to our continued support in the advancement of Goal 3 within Enough for All. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Thank you, Tim. That was impactful. That was heartbreaking for a lot of us who are watching it as well. And I would like to say that, as many have already mentioned in the chat, that we are with you. And as we move through our reconciliation journey, you know, any loss of yours is our loss as well. So your children are our children. We'll always keep them in our prayers. So thank you, and our prayers are with you. So hello, everybody. My name is Hajib Sen. I am the Community Engagement and Facilitation Specialist at VCC. So join me to read the third and final story that we have. It's short, but it's very impactful. It says, I personally felt like people blame me because of the color of my skin. I have not felt safe for a very long time. And stories like this were not uncommon in 2020. And this story could not be any true. From the BLM movement to the anti-Asian hate, to the terrorist attacks that happened just this week, to the discovery of the lost souls of 215 children, people not feeling safe in their own skin around us due to racism and discrimination has been a major problem. It's been in the forefront, and we're working towards making it a past tense. As VCC, we've spoken about, racism is a root cause of poverty. We've many blogs and vlogs, working with champions and working with partners in trying to change the system and shift it to become more equitable, free, and dignified. This work also continues with the work that I do with Poverty Talks. And for those of you who don't know, Poverty Talks supports people who are in lived experience. And it's a group of individuals who advise us on what's happening, because we live with the adage of nothing about us without us. And this is how we move forward, making sure that all the policies and the decisions that we make include the voices of those who are most impacted by them, and making sure that we're grounded and constantly reminded of the impacts of such decisions that we make. So if you could please take a moment with me and welcome Sue, and she will be giving us the report for Poverty Talks this year. Welcome, Sue.
Hello. Excuse me, sorry. A little emotional. My name is Sue Gwynn, and I have this whole thing prepared, but before we start that, I would like to say that in this time of such, quite frankly, shocking and blatant racism, and the fact that it is being worn on the outside instead of on the inside now, Poverty Talks has actually taken steps to make sure that we are learning, and we're learning and educating ourselves in our speech, in our movements, in our actions, because we have always felt that it was important, but now it's time to put our money where our mouth is and actually ensure that those things are being done. That's where I wanted to start. But back to the real presentation. I'm here to present the incredible work that Poverty Talks has done in 2020. It has been a successful year of engagement and community involvement, and despite the challenges with gathering, we have rose to the occasion and managed to pivot very quickly. Mayor Nenshi summed it up best at a recent poverty conference in Calgary when he said, "We're in the same storm, but we're definitely not all in the same boat." And it is clear that so many Calgarians don't have the same options and resources as others. So how do we make sure their voices are heard? Poverty Talks took a leading role in bringing to light the unique struggles of people living in poverty during the pandemic. We hosted conversations about the pandemic-related impacts, mental health, and brought our annual October 17th International Day to Eradicate Poverty event called Poverty is Talking, It's Time to Listen, to a larger, more diverse audience than ever before. We stayed up to date with events and policies affecting people living in poverty, like changes to assured income for the severely handicapped, Alberta Works, food insecurity, which is at a pandemic level, more so than the actual pandemic, and the damages caused to the homes by the hailstorm last June, almost a calendar year ago, that still aren't repaired. We've also worked hard to inform decision makers about response and recovery strategies and priorities, but more importantly, what recovery means for people living in poverty, because it's not the same. We were able to develop and deepen our relationships with other organizations and to allow for further collaborative work to be done. And moving forward in this post-pandemic world, it is clear that what we've learned this year cannot be forgotten and will forever be moved forward and continue to be built on as a strength. Amplifying the voices of lived experience, seeking out new opportunities to drive change and make Calgary a better version of itself, not just for those living in poverty, but for everyone, because as our mayor has said, and likes to remind us of, our neighbor's strengths are our strengths. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for that. And I can't express the importance of your work and to the work of Poverty Talks and having those voices lead the conversation. And I implore everybody who's here to make sure that you continue to include and elevate those voices in your work this year. I will be inviting Orit Shimoni in a moment to share a final reflection and to share her beautiful music with us. But before I do, I want to express on behalf of the VCC team, thanks and gratitude for joining us today, and to invite you again in a call to action about how the truth you heard today will inform your action over the next year. How will you, your organization, and your networks hold space for looking back and bring people forward? And how will the elders and artists tell the story of where we got to a year from now? It's my pleasure to introduce Orit Shimoni. I met Orit during one of those random circumstances that can only happen when we don't have COVID restrictions. And while we won't tell that story, it is an environment I look forward to getting back to, where we can connect in our community by chance and create connections because we all share this space together. Orit has been called by the Calgary Herald one of the nation's most alluring vocalists, and I believe that to be true. But how I experienced Orit during the pandemic as a person and as a leader in poverty reduction work was as someone whose words and whose music I could just go to. And I don't think she kind of knew this till recently, when I needed truth-telling and when I needed truth-telling and kindness. And so it is my pleasure to welcome Orit. Orit, I welcome you to share an artist reflection if you have one, and Orit will play her music as we end our time together today. Welcome, Orit. Orit, you're on mute.
Is that better?
Perfect.
I have been crying from the very beginning of this meeting, in fact, from before it even started. And I just want to share with you, first of all, thank you for having me participate in this. It means a lot. Before the pandemic, I was living out of a suitcase for 11 years straight with no fixed address. And obviously that all came crashing down. I was touring Canada and Europe by public transit and staying in people's homes. And what I missed the most, I mean, it took me a while to figure out, you know, who I am now and where I am now. What I missed the most from that lifestyle this year was encountering other human beings and hearing their stories. I can talk about myself forever and I can look at the news forever, but directly encountering other human beings and hearing their stories and seeing their faces and learning about what they do to make their communities better, that has been a source of such profound inspiration for me, and you know, it counters my natural cynicism. And so to learn about this organization and to kind of dig deeper into it and see the work that you incredible people are bringing forward is uplifting more than I can say. I want to address a couple of things that other people have said in this meeting and then bring it back to storytelling and art. I took notes. Tim Fox, you talked about showing up in spite of the pain you're carrying. And I think that that resonated very deeply. There is a lot of pain and has been for a long time for many of us in different ways. And showing up is hard, but it takes courage and resilience and strength. And so thank you for showing up with your pain, and thank all of you for doing that too. Erin Dingle, your poem was incredible. And you talked about, you know, we're people, we're not mythologies. And that is really important to remember, that we're humans and we have limitations, but I think the mythology aspect comes when we bring ourselves together in community, and then we can put all our superpowers together. And so we do create mythologies every day, certainly in this organization. Hagir, you said this line that I've been thinking about for a lot of time lately. Your children are our children. I think all of us feel that in our core if we're living, breathing people with hearts. And so this brings me to the song that I'm about to sing. And Sue, you just said it's time to put our money where our mouth is, and that is 100% true. For me, songwriting is this incredible opportunity to take a specific time and place and make it resonate in a more eternal and transcendent way. It's this magical gateway between the specific and the universal. And so I could share a specific story through a specific song, but I really wanted to choose a song of mine that is exactly that. It talks about the fact that under our layers of categories, we really are souls that are capable of connecting and building. And normally at my normal performances, this is a sing-along. Hopefully you are muted and can sing along. But if you listen to the words of this song, I don't think I need to really introduce it any further or make it clear why you should sing along. And I really hope moving forward, we move forward as souls who understand that the categories and the colors and the shapes that we come in are really should be so trivial. This is me to your soul. I know you can hear me. Bodies wither, the mind grows old, but your soul doesn't fear me. There is time, there is time, there is time when we meet. There is no ocean or forest, no bridge and no street. And you sing back to me, you sing back to me, you sing back to me, so I know that it's true. You sing back to me, that's your part, sing back to me, sing back to me. You sing back to me, so I know that it's true. This is me to your soul. You are hurting, I feel you. If you reach back to me, I believe this can heal you. There is time, there is time, there is time, but we must make it present. There's no reason for war between us. It is peaceful and pleasant. And you sing back to me, sing back to me, sing back to me, sing back to me, so I know that it's true. Sing back to me, I'll sing back to me, sing back to me, so I know that it's true. This is me to your soul. We are in this together. If you reach back to me, all these storms we can weather. I don't mind, I don't mind, I don't mind what shape you're in. Scars are just memories of moments we wear on our skin. And you sing back to me, ah, you sing back to me, you sing back to me, so I know that it's true. Sing back to me, ah, sing back to me, sing back to me, so I know that it's true. This is me to your soul. This is me to your soul. This is me to your soul.
Can we turn off our mics for actual unmuted applause? Thank you, Orit, so much. And thank you for giving us music. And that's its own call to action, to bring it to our hearts as we leave this AGM today. Thank you everyone for coming. And we look forward to connecting with you like this or in person very soon.